Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live at pghcitypaper.com. Email your questions and comments to Lynn at pghcitypaper.com.
Well, hello and a welcome to the aforementioned and it's the 14th of July. I have to stop acting surprised every time I give the date, but generally I am. So, thank God that's over. That would be the World Cup. I'm sick of it. Thank God it's over. I suppose it'll still be yapping for a while. God, I don't get it. I'm sorry, guys. I don't get it. Don't. But anyway, I had it on interspersed with the Pirate game. I was sort of like checking out both, not particularly enjoying either. And as the World Cup got toward the end, I stayed with it. And almost the entire time the World Cup was on, you kept hearing those little weather beeps and, the scrolling thing going on. There were severe thunderstorms here. There was at one point, I think, a tornado watch for one county. There was flash flood warnings. There was, I'm a radar junkie. So I went to the radar and was like, wow, I love this. I love that. All that like red and even heading toward purple, and it was everywhere. Except, and I pretty much kept going what this has been happening. All of this nasty weather, and I'm sure many of you got hit by it. But I can only speak for the eastern part of Pittsburgh. Pretty much nada. Nothing.
We got it really bad.
Did you get it in Lawrenceville?
Well, I was in the South Hills.
Oh, you were in the South Hills, right. I'm looking. I see Bethel Park is getting pummeled.
Yeah.
Pummeled. I look out my window. The sun is shining. I see just to my north, the North Hills is being blown away. What's happening in my backyard? A drop or two. Every once in a while, it would rain for like 5 minutes. I'd say, come on. But I could see for some reason, the city was always in between these two fronts. I like a good thunderstorm. Dang it. But anyway, I said to no one in particular, I wonder if it's just because it's the World Cup that the meteorologists over at WTAE are not interrupting the programming as they do when they've got this much wild weather in the vicinity. Do they not? Excuse me, do they not? And then, just to double-check my theory, I checked out KDKA and PXI. And they, at least when I checked, they were not interrupting the always breathtakingly exciting golf matches that they were broadcasting. So I did think, though, that I bet that this is figuring into the calculation of whether we interrupt. Every 4 years event in the final moments, and we ain't going to screw with that. The scroll will be just fine in terms. Well, guess what? In a station, I guess in upstate New York, not sure which station it was, WENY, probably stands for Western New York. I don't know so much for Northern. And they interrupted with 5 minutes left in the World Cup. Score 1-0 at that point. And as you can imagine, and they stayed. Their meteorologist stayed on the air with his fancy graphics, but they had a tornado warning. And so I don't know that they had much of an out. It's a tornado warning, which means there is a potential for people to die, and they have a responsibility to broadcast that, and maybe not just with a scroll. So this poor meteorologist is going on and talking about that, and also pointing out, maybe he could have done it less than 5 minutes, and then pointing out the other signs. All hell breaks loose, as you can imagine. I have been looking at some of the tweets that came in during that period, and I mean, death threats. Hey, WEN-TV, eat a bag of dicks. Jeez. What in the motherfucker are you thinking? There's 10 minutes left in the World Cup and you broadcast a friggin' weather warning? Fuck. Go fuck yourself. Fuck you. The World Cup happens every 4 years. Fuck you guys. The game's still on. Assholes. You're going to interrupt the final minutes of the World Cup with a weather update. Fuck you. And on it went. Which is why I thought that a station would be very, very reluctant, to say the least, to do what they usually do when they get a radar map that looked as interesting as it did here, too, yesterday. And I'm sure a phone call or two got made around here, because there was at one point a tornado warning for one county, which is enough usually for them to come on in. So there you have it. It was the viewers in now they're saying southern New York and northern PA. And they are enraged. There you have it. I'm looking at this picture of this weather guy, and boy, I wonder if he's under protective custody or anything today. It's a good thing there wasn't some amazing goal scored while they were away. But anyway, I don't want to talk about soccer again for 4 more years. Okay, I really don't. And I must say, I don't get it. But I tried. I did. I really, 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 really tried. I don't get it. I know it's an exciting game and all that kind of stuff, but, you know, I got enough games to watch. I don't see why Americans... I mean, I think American exceptionalism should continue in this regard instead of giving in and joining the madness. We haven't been into soccer, just like we stick with our inches and yards and our ounces and gallons and quarts. I like the fact that we're sort of recalcitrant, sort of. We are. Obstinate. And now we're just giving in because the media have sort of just kept pushing a little bit and then pushing a little bit more and pushing because there's money in them our games and getting people addicted to another kind of football. Okay, I got to note the passing of Lorin Maazel. I never met this guy, and I must say I didn't particularly want to. I had the sense of Lorin Maazel as just from his look. His look, he always had his nose in the air, and then he talked like he had his nose in the air, and comported himself with his nose in the air, and that's off-putting to me, frankly. But nobody can take away from him that he was considered a brilliant conductor. Yes, he was a child prodigy. Yes, he did lead some of the greatest orchestras in the world and clearly helped to bring our little Pittsburgh Symphony into that upper tier of internationally recognized orchestras. I did meet both his mother and his father. And my sense is he got his nose in the air from his mother. That was my sense of her. I thought, was a little scary, Marie. But his father, just the cutest guy you could have, cutest little guy imaginable. Lincoln, his name was. Lynn Maazel. And I thought he was, well, adorable. Adorable. But Marie, I remember interviewing her, and I was asking her about her famous son, and she was telling me about his childhood here. And what a sad childhood, designed to make, because he was such a prodigy and so unlike other children. And because he had to practice his violin and his piano, she considered his hands, his fingers, to be of such value and so important that she really wouldn't let him play with the kids in the neighborhood because you could hurt a finger. I mean, she flat out told me that. And I thought, oh, what a odd childhood. And of course, you know that he was, by the age of 9, he was conducting huge orchestras, something that the orchestras didn't always love. He was apparently supposed to conduct the Radio City Music Hall Orchestra. And the orchestra was enraged when they heard that this kid was going to be conducting them. And to express their outrage, when the child conductor strode on the stage, he was greeted by the orchestra all with lollipops in their mouths. And strangely, this ingenious guy, you would think would, especially with this hoity-toity air he had, would have been schooled at the greatest schools in the world, would have been sent to the greatest schools. He went to the same grade school my kid went to. He went to Linden. And then he went to Peabody. And then he went to the University of Pittsburgh. But he ends up speaking 6 languages. And obviously extremely worldly and sophisticated by virtue, I guess, of his travel. He did something. Why am I blanking on the name of that lunatic basketball player, former basketball player who went to North Korea? Dennis Rodman. You would not think for a minute that Dennis Rodman and the great Lorin Maazel had anything in common, right? Right? They did. They did. I'm blanking on the year, but it wasn't all that long ago. I think it was like 2008, 2009. Maazel takes the New York Philharmonic to North Korea and to play there. And all hell broke loose. How dare you? This is the most brutal government in the world, and how dare you do this, and you're interfering in foreign policy. And he took to the Wall Street Journal and wrote an op-ed piece and said essentially what Rodman said. Rodman said. He had the same argument that Rodman. Maybe he made it in a little more articulate fashion, but he same one. He said he was bringing people and their cultures together on common ground. And that this was the way to form situations in which peace and change could occur. But yeah, Dennis Rodman and Lorin Maazel. I love that odd partnership. I do. All right. I'm sure a lot of you maybe had more personal relations with him. And maybe you'll tell me he was a nice guy. But he just never seemed like a nice guy to me. He seemed like the New York Times calls him brilliant and intense and enigmatic and headstrong and arrogant and blah, blah, blah. You could tell that, there's this he was arrogant. And if that's one of the things that drives you nuts, because it does drive me nuts, then you're not inclined to have thought well of him. Okay, we got two emailers coming in on soccer. And Henri writes, for all you folks who say, I just don't get soccer, I would like to toss that back at you and say, I just don't get baseball. That's fair. That is fair. Because baseball, I can't imagine bringing somebody who never saw a baseball game to a baseball game. And have them looking around and wondering what all of these people are doing here at this boring event. What the hell is happening? How could all these people get so excited about this slow, dull, incomprehensible game? So I know. So it's what you know. I know. It's what you know. Henry then says, with soccer, you have minimally 90 minutes of nonstop action. I understand that. In baseball, you have what might be 5 entire minutes of action spread out over 3 hours of what I would compare to sitting in a doctor's waiting room. I disagree with your 5 minutes. Someone actually did, and I remember talking about this. I think it was the Wall Street Journal. They actually did the hard work watching games and with a stopwatch and seeing when there was action and when there was not. And I believe, and this might surprise you or maybe not, Henry, that football was the worst in terms of action. Although when football had action, often it seemed like more, than a baseball action. But football, the amount of actual playing that goes on in a football game is about, I think, not much more than 5 minutes. It's not much more than 5 minutes. And they did not count huddles when the clock's ticking. And they didn't lining up, walking back after a play, all that, the timeouts, the interminable, and, very little action. Baseball, I believe, had more action than football, but totally take your point. Understand. I just can't get into it. Up, down, and it's too far away from me. It's the same problem a lot of people have with hockey. It's such a huge field. And I don't need a lot of scoring. I appreciate defense. I also do not appreciate the sort of, the theatricality of the individual players, if they even trip. And, as they're tripping, you see the grimace beginning on their faces, and then they hit the ground. And roll around, clutching their heads, their knees, their whatever. It's just that babyish aspect of it makes me nuts. But Ansel writes, Lynn, when I was watching the World Cup, I was highly upset that they were showing the radar map over the top of the game. They were? I never saw that. I was okay with the scrolling, but I was not okay with the radar map. I didn't see that. I mean, I said I was back and forth. So I ran to WTAE's Facebook page, and I posted a complaint, as did, I can imagine, gazillions of other people. Only 5 minutes later, the radar map disappeared. I bet they got inundated and did not reappear for the rest of the game. The power of Facebook, I thought. Well, no, the rage of their viewers. And as you could see from the tweets I read you that came out of New York and Pennsylvania that were watching the game on that station. Whoa. But, the same kind of heated, vitriolic reaction would come when I was working at WTAE, when let's say at noon or at 11 a.m., a soap opera was interrupted by some breaking news, and legitimate breaking news. Back then, when I was in TV, they didn't jump in just to jump in as they seem to now. I mean, it would be something serious. And I once did a story on the poor receptionist down at the, taking the calls. At least it was before you could get ripped apart and eviscerated on Twitter and Facebook and all that stuff. And man, people, it didn't matter if, World War III were being declared. Where's the edge of night? How dare you? And anyone, of course, who ever watched a what do you call them, soap operas, knows full well that you can miss weeks of a soap opera and catch up in one viewing. The slowness of anything really happening and the constant repetition so you get it is, if you've ever watched, you would know. Unbelievable. Okie doke. All right, that's it on that. We have dispatched with soccer, thank God, and Maazel. May he rest in peace. And we come back with some other stuff, believe me. I think some of it more entertaining, perhaps, than what we have already accomplished. In a minute.
Email your questions and comments to Lynn at pghcitypaper.com or call Lynn at 412-316-3381. Lynn Cullen Live will return in a moment.
For the millions living with COPD, breathing becomes a real struggle. COPD stands for chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, but you may have heard of it as chronic bronchitis or emphysema. Over time, it makes it harder and harder to breathe until you feel like you're breathing through a straw. COPD is the 4th leading cause of death in the U.S. It kills 1 person every 4 minutes, and it took my grandmother. An estimated 24 million Americans are affected, but as many as half of them don't even know it. It's a race against time to spread the word about this serious disease. If you're over 35 and have ever smoked, you could be at risk. The good news is, there are steps you can take to improve your symptoms. I'm Danica Patrick, and I drive for COPD. Take action today to breathe better tomorrow. Join the movement at driveforcopd.com, take our screening questionnaire today, and talk to your doctor.
Pittsburgh City Paper's annual City Guide magazine is available now. Pick up one for a special look at the unique neighborhoods of Pittsburgh, plus the most complete guides of restaurants, bars, nightlife, festivals, exhibits, entertainment, and culture in the burg. Pittsburgh City Paper available at over 1,700 locations throughout western Pennsylvania and on the web at pghcitypaper.com, on your smartphone at citypapermobile.com.
You're listening to Lynn Cullen Live at pghcitypaper.com. Once again, here's Lynn Cullen.
All right, a quick email from William. He says that he recalls Lorin Maazel's father, Lincoln. By the way, he was an actor. And he recalls him playing the grandfather, but claiming to be the cousin, of the title character in a George Romero film called Martin, which news to me. George Romero's attempt to tell a realistic vampire story. And in the movie, it fell to Lynn Maazel to do the stake pounding through the heart. And he says, I don't think Lorin would have gone in for that. Yeah. I mean, so yeah, there you have the father, Lincoln, who I thought was just delightful. Yeah. Working in movies and putting stakes through the heart of vampires, and you could not possibly see his son doing the same. I am certain. Okay. I read this and I couldn't even believe it, but believe it. 'Tis true. Some conservatives, the real knuckle draggers, I'm going to suggest, who are not only against tree huggers, but they're actually seemingly against the environment. They have found a new way, it says here in the week, of expressing their opposition to President Obama's climate change initiatives. And they're actually spending money on this. They are buying a device that, when put on their truck's exhaust or smokestack or whatever that thing is called, spews out as much black smoke as possible. It's called coal rolling. Coal rolling. And according to one of the guys who sells these smokestacks, it's a smokestack you install that just every time it just keeps belching black smoke as it goes down the road. And one of these jerks who sells this thing in Wisconsin says, well, I'll do it in a proper accent. Yeah, it's a way of giving liberals the finger. You want clean air and a tiny carbon footprint? Well, screw you. Can you imagine? You want clean air. Screw you. What? All right. That's fine. That's fine. Your hatred for this black president is so intense, you're willing to poison your children and your children's children and your children's children's children for all eternity. Yeah, right. Wow. Not eternity until we totally destroy the earth. And speaking of bad manners, I just have one other thing. Some astronomers from Ukraine, who are decidedly not lovers of Russia and Vladimir Putin, have done what I guess anyone can do. You can, for a pretty small price, get naming rights to a star out there in the firmament, because most stars are just named with letters and numbers. So they did buy the rights to rename the star KIC 9696936. And they named it Putin Willow, which roughly translates as Putin's a dickhead. So there is, as you gaze up at the sky at night, there is a star out there twinkling with a name such as that. Okay. And speaking of, it's amazing how things segue. God. Speaking of things environmental, I want to drop back to talking about a subject we've talked quite a bit about in the last months, and that is these newfangled taxi cab services, Uber and Lyft. They're getting an awful lot of ink because what is happening here in Pittsburgh is happening in cities all over the country and even cities in Europe as Uber, more than Lyft, because Uber's the one with the more money, as Uber aggressively tries to launch itself. And this has the sense of a tsunami that cannot be stopped. It really does, and I think you'll agree with me. But there was a piece, an interesting piece, in the New York Times yesterday about how Uber now, I mean, they got a strategy here that they're implementing. And so far, it's going pretty damn well. You can see how much they fear utility commissions in states that say, you can't do that. They say, so what are you going to do? Fine us? Fine us. We're worth billions. Fine us. So what they've done in New York City, where they are running, and in Washington, D.C., where they are running, is to really undercut by pricing the taxi services to the point where they do not make money. And they're willing to pay these fines. They're willing to lose money. And what they're doing is saying, so taking Uber, you're saving money. If it would cost $8 to take the taxi and it's $6 to take us, well then, and you take us twice a day, then that's $20 maybe a week, if not more, and that adds up, and yada, yada, yada. So here's Uber's chief executive. Okay, for the person who doesn't have a car, let's say you take 3 or 4 trips a day on average. If we can get the price of Uber low enough, we can get to where it is cheaper for a person to use Uber than to own a car. So it's not as though they're trying to just attract people who already don't have cars or who are too drunk to drive. They truly want to create a totally different mindset. And forget those of us who are of a certain age and set in our ways, used to having a car. There are so many people, and I think we've talked about this before, under the age of 30 who not only don't have a car, they don't have a landline telephone, they don't have cable TV, they're not living at all like we lived. They are taking things that we thought were necessities of life and saying, don't need that. So Uber, looking toward the future, is thinking that they're going to be part of what already is starting to happen, which is auto sales, the amount of people who own cars. It was doing nothing but going up since the day Henry Ford put his assembly line in action. And now, for the first time, I think it was last year, the number of Americans who own cars, there's a dip. There's just the slightest little dip. And understand this, that once that dip occurs, and once a dip becomes a trough and more people don't have cars and are going to be relying on Uber and on Lyft, says right here in the New York Times. I mean, you don't have to be a genius to know what this business plan would be. So even as Uber explores how low prices can go, it is also wrestling with how high prices can go. And in fact, it has already come under fire in New York specifically for what is called surge pricing. So that when all of a sudden demand is exceeding supply, like in a blizzard or in something where you can't get a cab for life or money, they've been jacking up their rates, which is something that the regulated taxi companies cannot do. Now, this has infuriated customers, of course, and gotten the attention of New York's Attorney General, who has already accused Uber of price gouging and surge pricing in extreme situations, arguing that they have charged people as much as 8 times the usual rate. And that if the law has to be rewritten, it will be rewritten, but that violates the same law that prevents gas stations from spiking their price, let's say, in the aftermath of a hurricane, right? Where you get those long lines of desperate people. Those gas stations, by law, cannot make money on that. Uber so far is getting away with it. Hello?
Hi.
Hi.
So I'm not sure. I mean, are you just stating facts, or are you for or against, or?
I'm not. I'm neither. I'm stating facts. I'm stating facts.
Sorry, you still there?
Yeah, I'm stating.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear what you said. I'm sorry.
I'm stating facts. Hello?
I'm sorry. Okay, yeah, I can hear you. I didn't hear what you said though. Sorry.
I'm stating facts. I'm not giving my opinion.
I wasn't sure. I had heard you talk about it in the past, and I know you get kind of upset with taxi service or cab service or whatever.
Yeah.
I am not one who fears change, in this sense. I mean, good things can come from this, but for the most part, I don't like the idea of some entity thumbing its nose at the established rules, the rules that are set up to regulate this, to regulate cab and taxi service. And, for anybody that thinks that Uber and those companies are doing this out of altruism, well, the part you just said about them jacking rates up, once they become once they become the grand entity that dictates service, they'll back their rates up just like everybody else.
Exactly right. But I think that's what this is saying. And so now they're the little underdogs fighting. Don't kid yourself. These are billionaires behind this operation. These are capitalists. And once they secure the market or create a situation where you rely on them, don't worry, those rates are going up.
Well, and here's the other thing to think about. Do not think that there are many other capitalists that are watching this and thinking, geez, we can just flaunt those regulations all we want. And the other things that can lead to, pollution regulations, we don't have to pay attention to pollution regulations. We have billions of dollars. And, to some degree, that's already happening.
That is. I mean, you think industry doesn't say, oh, I don't care, these fines that we're getting for polluting the air are so inconsequential to us. We ain't fixing, that smokestack.
No, but it's not. I don't think it's to the degree as blatantly as these companies are doing it. I mean, this is a marker of what's already started to happen in a large part, and that's corporations replacing government.
Okay, I'm not going to disagree.
So okay, Lynn.
Okay,
thanks.
Bye. I agree. The idea that, I've said for years, if you think nation states sort of are the way the world is configured and that is where the power is, you're lagging behind a little bit. Because now with this thing we call the global economy, the real forces that are shaping our lives, and government does their bidding. These nation states do the bidding of these economic giants. We fight wars so that they can enrich themselves and have access to the natural resources they need. There is little doubt that global capitalism is triumphant and is having its way with not only us little people, but with the institutions that we wrongly think still run things. Up to a certain extent, they run things. But if push comes to shove, and we see it happening in state government, where a corporation will say, hey, you give us what we want, or we're throwing 20,000 people out of jobs, and we're going somewhere else. You see it the way stadiums are built while whole neighborhoods crumble. You see it that the power is with corporate America. It's with the entertainment industry. It's with the pharmaceutical companies. It's with oil and gas. That's where it is. Telecommunications. And it all comes to a grinding halt if they say so. So let's not romanticize Uber and Lyft. That's all I'm saying. Be aware that what you're seeing is some real hard ball being played in the transportation sector of the global economy. And actually, if they have their way, and I have little doubt that they won't, their real end, what they really want to see is literally people relying on them pretty much totally to get around. They do want to see people say, hey, I don't need a car. I mean, I've crunched the numbers. And this works every bit as well, and it's much less of a drain on my budget. I don't need a car. So the implications of all of that are probably pretty dang big. But once enough people rely on the Ubers and the Lyfts to get to work, to get around, well, as I said, they can have their way with us. This piece, and it was written by economist Neil Irwin, he says, one thing is clear, that this is going to be a brutally competitive arena. So just to be a little more, aware of what's going on as you see this play out. We tend to look at it as, this is, these two startups trying to take down Yellow Cab. And, we can root for what looks to be these little underdogs. Don't believe that. They ain't. We got an email here to share from Rob in Braddock. In the aftermath of LeBron returning to Cleveland, I'm sure your listeners and viewers want to know if you forgive. I never was mad at him. If you forgive LeBron James for taking his talents to South Beach and joining the Heat, or you believe him returning to the Cavs is like America forgiving George W. for his 8 years as president and reelecting him president in 2016? Oh, I haven't heard that one floated. First of all, George W. wouldn't do it. No, I mean, I think the whole thing, I think LeBron had every right to do what he did. And I think there's something sweet about him coming home. He only left because he wanted to win some championships. He's did that, and now he can go home. And, the sort of hypocrisy of some of the fans there in Cleveland who wanted to kill him, hang him in effigy, who said these horrible things about him, now welcoming him back with open arms, including, I guess, the owner. It's the same owner, right, who flipped out. It's not the same thing. I guess I'm glad for Cleveland, as everybody says, is having a really good year. They got the number one, Johnny Football or whatever the hell his name is, for their hapless Browns. They've got LeBron back, and they've got, oh boy, they can have him too, the Republicans coming for their national convention in 2016. But Cleveland's getting itself on the map in some, big ways, which is, we know as a city how much, you sort of get off on that kind of thing. Okay. Another little bit of information that I don't know if it means anything, but it's sort of interesting. Some reporter, a PhD in economics from Harvard, too, and obviously a guy who knows number crunching, did an awful lot of work trying to figure out where the people who are the most bigoted folks in the country tend to live. He wanted to make a map of the United States showing where probably the most bigots were. Now, that would seem to be a judgment call, and I mean, in large part, I guess it is. Your bigot might be somebody else's man of principle. However, what he decided to do is he took what is considered this country's most popular internet hate site. I don't know that that's how the people who go to it view that, but it's generally thought to be that. And it's called Stormfront.org. It was the creation of a former KKK leader. The Southern Poverty Law Center, which really tracks hate groups and hate things, said that nearly 100 murders in the last 5 years were committed by registered Stormfront members. So these are angry people filled with hate at certain groups, and a lot of them are carrying guns. And I hate to have you even go to this site to look. I hope you don't. Just take my word for it from this report that much of what is written on Stormfront is what you would expect. People writing about how black people commit most crimes, which is, by the way, not true. And they really focus on black on white crimes. They are alarmed at the country being invaded by brown-skinned people. They mock gays. They mock feminists. I mean, how is this different right now than right-wing radio? Just a little bit more extreme. But the clear thing that is what makes them most apoplectic, they say, is Jews. They think that all the other troubles, the brown people coming across the border, the black people here, everything, feminism, liberalism, homosexuals, and the rights they now have are a direct result of Jews controlling societal changes. And so he takes this site, and then he looks at who belongs to this site, where do they live, how old are they, and he came up with a few things that are sort of counterintuitive and pretty interesting, I think. First of all, 30% of the people on this site are female, which seems high to me, but states with the most members per capita, not surprisingly: Montana, Alaska, Idaho. Okay. Here's, like, he tries to tell us who these people are, and how one of the most popular social groups that you can join on the site is called In Support of Anti-Semitism. And there are more people joining that from New York than anywhere else, where there's a sizable Jewish population. And one guy who he features, who joined in 2001, in his self-description said this: "I'm a good-looking, racially aware 30-year-old internet developer living in New York City." Now, that also points to something he found out. You think these people are ignoramuses? No. A lot of them highly educated. Highly educated. Also, the thinking of social scientists always is that anti-Semitism and anybody immigrants and anti-black always surges during times of bad economic times, right? When people are looking around for a scapegoat. I always took that as gospel. And it really came from studies done in the 1930s by social scientists who reported a definite correlation between bad economic conditions and the lynchings of blacks. And this led to sort of a generalized assumption, and understandably sort of an intuitive conclusion, that people turn to hating some other when their lives are going poorly. But growing research is showing that may very well not be true, which blows my mind. A report in 2001 showed, using a lot of data apparently, there was actually no relationship between lynchings and economic hardship, and that the number of lynchings actually fell during the Great Depression. Also, remember when we first were introduced to terrorists, and we were told that these are poor people who are so desperate that these suicide bombers are willing to blow themselves up, and the desperation of these masses of poor in the Arab world. And then when we started looking at, like, the guys responsible for 9/11, and we looked at their backgrounds, that didn't fit. They were educated. And some of their leaders were highly educated. These weren't poor people, and they weren't people who were ignoramuses. Same thing that this guy sees when he starts crunching what information he can get off of Stormfront and its membership. Ku Klux Klan members are actually better educated than the average American. Says right here, it's hard to believe, but there it is. And so this idea we have that these kind of people, these haters, and white nationalists and crazed anti-Semites are sort of inhabiting some different world than we are, that they're idiots, they just are victims of their own ignorance and or circumstances. It turns out, as this guy who looked at the postings and stuff and started to be able to get a sense of who these people were, said, it's just not really true. A lot of them sound an awful lot like us, graduated from the same colleges, really loved Breaking Bad, belonged to online dating sites, have read Shakespeare, all this kind of stuff, and that's mind-blowing. The biggest surge in membership in Stormfront came on November 5th, 2008. What day was that? That was the day that a black man, Barack Obama, didn't become, but had won the presidency, was elected president. And yet, I'm telling you, this idea that we have in our heads of knuckle draggers, that's what I always call them, is not quite, it's not true, apparently. And this guy, after doing all this number crunching and looking at what these educated people believe and are saying, ends his piece with some questions. Why do some people feel this way? What is to be done about it? I have pored over data of an unprecedented breadth and depth thanks to our new digital era, and I can honestly offer the following answer. I have no idea. Never something you want to hear. I appreciate his humility. It doesn't dovetail, the data don't dovetail with the caricature. Can't figure out how someone who is educated and literate, the number one thing that these members of this hate site love is reading. Of course, you could say, what the hell are they reading? We have a call. Hello.
Hey, Lynn.
Hi.
George from Moon.
Hi, George.
I had to get a comment in here and what you're talking about with the educational or mental abilities of these miscreants. I don't think that's anything new. I think that when you dig down into movements like that, you always find that predominantly the leadership is educated and sponsored and motivated from formal revolutions to terrorist groups today. Bin Laden came from a rich family. He was highly educated. Look at the communist movement. Lenin was educated. And the thing is that they draw in followers that are usually subpar in education and experience.
No, but this guy's saying the people, these aren't leaders that are on this website. These aren't the leaders. He's saying as you look at what they're writing about, that they're educated. Like this guy who's a web developer in New York City. Well, he's got, and I mean, he chose to put that in the piece, but he also talks about this one woman who's 26 years old, and she's really into history and writes poetry, and she has quotes from Shakespeare throughout, and
Yeah, but again, that's a snapshot of one group. Okay, that's a website group. I would say let's gain more data on this, and I think it still would hold true that you're going to have a leadership that's motivated, educated, and has resources, and you're going to have a following that is not.
Well, I don't know where he got the number saying that the average Ku Klux Klan member was actually better educated than the typical American.
That's the one I would really want to challenge.
But
of course, you know, that when you take, 300 million people and classify it against a couple 100,000, you know, then you're going to get kind of skewed numbers.
And and you also know that the average American ain't very well educated.
Right, exactly.
Right.
That's where,
right,
you know, the surprise comes in. Any motivated group is going to have a greater awareness, but I don't know about being highly educated. I think that comes from the leadership of any group, whether you agree with them or not, right wing, left wing, whatever. Groups are motivated by people who are propelled, but they can't be propelled unless they have resources, and they're often the most aware and the educated. But they're always the leadership. They never do you, like I'm reading books about the history of the Vietnam War, and Ho Chi Minh was highly educated. He went to Paris and Moscow and Europe and got educated, and was fighting for Vietnamese independence long before, you know, the French Indochina War started and everything like that. And he was the Maximo leader. Fidel Castro, a doctor of philosophy from Havana University. It goes on and on and on, without exception, that movements are propelled by educated people who have resources.
Was not educated or had resources.
So, my wife just pointed out that Hitler is an exception. Yeah, Hitler came from a middle-class family, though. He did not come from poor folks.
He wasn't educated.
All right, you two. You go argue somewhere else.
Yeah, but I'm just trying to make the point that I think that this is not exceptional, what he's found, but I think you can't read broadly that these people are generally highly educated. They're certainly highly motivated, but I don't think all you have to do is do a common sense sampling yourself of talk radio, of talk television, of talk to the people themselves, and you will find, their awareness and educational level.
Okay.
Thank you. That's my comment.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I just want to say, though, that there is a map here, a color-coded map, showing how many people from each state are on Stormfront, and Pennsylvania, well, go ahead.
Hello, Lynn.
Hello, Clarence. Hi.
I disagree with the previous caller.
Okay.
My sense is that he's looking at education, knowledge and all that stuff, and these types of things aren't based on, knowledge.
They're emotional.
They're emotional.
Right.
Yeah. You could be this, a Mensa member and still be a racist.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all it is. That's what he's surprised about the educational level, but these are emotional issues.
That's right.
Yeah. And emotion trumps logic a lot. Yeah.
I think that's true. Who's that Nobel Prize-winning physicist or something who is like a known bigot? I mean, he's a total white racist. I forget. Mm-hmm. I think he died recently. But, absolutely. And you're right. That's a great distinction to make. We're talking about so you can be brilliant and be out and out, bigot.
I watched a talk one time by my man, Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he was talking about, it was like him talking with Richard Dawkins. Yeah. And Richard Dawkins was talking about he doesn't understand how, a certain average American believes in creationism. Mm-hmm. He doesn't get it. We have all this evidence and all this kind of good stuff. And Neil pointed out that, scientists, believe in creationism. He said that when you go to, like, the top scientists, the members of the Science Academy, there are still like 7% of the scientists who believe in a God. He said, those are the people you want to talk to. and that's what I see here. You know what I mean?
Well, wait. I would think it'd be higher. I don't see
how. No, I think it's like 15%. I said 7.
Well, yeah, but I can see where a scientist would still believe in a God.
Yeah.
I mean, because
the average scientist, it's something. It's high. It's like in the 30s.
Yeah.
But we're talking about the elite scientists.
Oh.
When you're talking about just members of the Science Academy, and it drops down to like 15%. We're talking about the Nobel Prize winners and stuff like that.
Okay.
You know, and I said, yeah, it's an emotional issue. Has nothing to do with education. You know, it has nothing to do with how smart you are, your knowledge, and all this kind of good stuff. It's emotion.
Okay.
And emotion is what they call it, the reptilian brain.
Yeah.
It's very hard to defeat it.
Right.
You know.
That's a great call. Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye. And just one quick thing, because we're over time. I was raving about this black and white 60s documentary I saw last week called Salesman. And a lot of you have told me that you have found it for streaming online. And Aaron is saying it's available on Hulu Plus, and this is the Maazel brothers, I think is how it's pronounced. They're the ones who did Grey Gardens. They're the ones who did that Rolling Stone Altamont one. They are just, their stuff is amazing. But this was their first, I believe, Salesman, and it, I thought, was one of the more brilliant looks at America, at a slice of America in that year, that time, and wow, it just blows you away. So if you want, make a point of trying to see that. It's just called Salesman. Okay? Thank you very much. You will thank me if you do watch it. I'm sure of that. That's it for today. Stay dry, stay cool, and stay, I don't know, I can't think of another stay. Stay put, but I don't mean that. Bye.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper, Steel City Media, and its advertisers.